Gonna do some day filming. Not at night. Not with the fan on. Outside. In the backyard. Timestamp. So, alright guys, today I'm going to jump back into the original series, Games I Got. And I'm going to talk about the games that I've got in my collection. And I thought I'd jump into Red Rising. There's a couple other ones that I've talked about that I want to get to the table, maybe to play as well, but also just to talk about. Red Rising, though, is specifically interesting to me. I need to stop saying specifically so much. I need to use other words. There are other words out there in the ether, in the dictionaries of the world that I could use. But I wanted to talk about Red Rising because I have read the original trilogy. I have read the 2 existing books of the second trilogy, and it is a universe that I really enjoyed. So that's the book series, though. We need to talk about the game. Timestamp. What is it? Red Rising is a card drafting, card management, and combo chaining game where players are using... I guess I need to give a little bit of context about the world of Red Rising. Because there are people who are going to play this game who have never read the books, who don't care about the books, but I think that this game deserves to be talked about within the context of the book, because it's better if you've played the book. And I know that may not be a strength for other players or other gamers, that a game is better in the context of knowing the theme or the content or the inspiration behind the material. But I really do think that this game takes a substantial step up once you appreciate or realize the world that it's, bringing to life in a new medium. And so Red Rising is a story about a color cast segmented world where on top you have gold and then progressively lower silver, copper, bronze, brown, violet, gray, orange, obsidian, pink, red, yellow, white. I think that's all of them. There's a lot of colors, but that's because the society, which is the name of the intergalactic civilization that spans, well, not really intergalactic, just galaxy spanning across the solar system, it's all divided up into what people do and how they're valued based off of their color. And so you have red at the bottom and gold at the top. And the story is kind of a revolutionary, from small or humble beginning story of a red character named Darrow. And the game is based off of that. And so you have different casts of colors that are represented by characters and card types, and they all have point values, and they typically have lower point values for where they are in that color pyramid. And then gold has, the strongest base value. But all of them have additional scoring bonuses based off of the cards that you have them with. And without trying to spoil too much of the story or of the original trilogy, it is a narrative that focuses on breaking societal norms and uprooting a established system of discrimination and classism. And so a lot of the cards in here play off of what those characters do in the books and what those different colors act like typically. So it's a card management system, and you start with a hand, and there's a board in front of you with locations where cards are allocated to, And on your turn, you try to place cards and use their abilities and pick up other cards. And through that process, you're also moving up a few different, not victory tracks, but point tracks in different ways. One of them is collecting the resource helium, which is very important as a resource in the books. And then another one is the fleet track, which space power and ship power in the books is also a very important thing. When you have a galaxy-spanning society or civilization, the ability to control space or control passage and have the largest fleets becomes valuable. Kind of like, 18th century Atlantic, maybe 17th century as well. Just like, that time in which naval power was, the largest indicator of strength, like internationally. So kind of similar just with fleets. So fleet track is another one of those victory tracks. And then you have the influence, or the institute, which is where the gold members of society send their children to essentially learn how to play politics, learn how to play war. And so those are the 3 additional tracks that you'll kind of push up, and those are actually the instigators of the end game when those reach a certain threshold for 1 or more players. But beyond those extra tracks that you are progressively increasing on, you're trying to hone your hand of 5 or more cards, because you can get more cards, 5 or more cards into a tightly meshed synergistic hand that, the card combos, the point combos all go off each other. So that is what this is. And then it's designed by Jamey Stegmaier and Alexander Schmidt. And then I think the artists are Jackie Davis, Miles Bensky, who worked on Rolling Realms, and then who else is it? Justin Wong. That's right, Justin Wong. So those are the artists, those are the designers, and then this is published by Stegmaier Games. So I think that's a pretty good synopsis. We can move on. Timestamp. Why I have it. I have this because I love the books. I started reading the books back in a late college, early master's degree, so undergraduate or master's. I can't really remember. Pretty soon after the first one came out, so that when the second and the third one came out, it was kind of it was. I don't know if you're avid readers or not, or what you enjoy in terms of media, but when I find a good book series, there are times where if it's good enough, if it's engaging enough, I kind of stop what I'm doing and just read. And so when the subsequent books after the first one, when they were released, they were events where I essentially stopped working or stopped school for the day and just read. So I have a very fond attachment to this book series, and that's why I wanted the game. I was not able to secure one of the advanced review copies from Stegmaier Games, and so as soon as I knew that I wasn't going to get one of those, I immediately pre-ordered the collector's edition of it because I knew that I wanted it. And I'll talk about collector versus retail maybe towards the end of this when I talk about ratings and other stuff. But that's why I have it. I love the books. I knew that I wanted something. I wanted to see a representation of this universe outside of the books. They've had TV rights or film rights jumping around for years now, and nothing has come of it. And so this has been my first opportunity to jump into a world that I really like, and I was excited to see that. So that's why I have it. Timestamp, when did I get it? As soon as this was available. I pre-ordered it, so it came in, I think this was a 2020 release. I think this was last year. I think so. Pandemic time is weird. When did this come out? Well, okay, so 2014 is when the Pierce... Maybe that's when he got the rights to it, but that's not obviously when this came out. Let me see. But this is the first printing, so I mean, it was, sometime soon. I don't know if it's going to be on here. We'll see. You know what, guys? I'm not going to bore you with my attempt to find stuff. It came out like last year. And if it didn't come out last year, it came out 2019. Well, wait, it's 2022 now. Oh my gosh, it's a whole different year. So, I guess that it might have actually come out in 2021. Did it? I don't know. I have no idea. This is probably much, a simple Google search would have solved this by now, but that's my phone, so I can't use it to search. But, alright, let's see. What is it? Why I have it? When did I get it? And what do I like about it? Once again, I'll jump back to the previous comment where I think this game is better if you know the characters. For example, Jesse thought that this was average, and I think Alex was maybe in the same boat. I think they thought it was good, but not something that they would maybe seek to play over time. Whereas I think that, Alex hasn't read the books, but I think Jesse has now read at least the first trilogy. I think he's read through the first trilogy and is maybe jumping into the second trilogy. And his excitement about this world, I don't know if he's played it since he's read the books, but I know his excitement about the world has very much elevated to the point where I imagine if he played this again, he would appreciate it a lot more because he knows the characters and how the story functions. And that's probably at the end of the day a detriment to people who aren't interested in the stories. But if you are a fan of Red Rising, I think it's just a really fun game. It doesn't take a long time. It's like 30 to 45 minutes. If you play at higher player counts, because I think it can sustain up to 6. I would not play this at 5 or 6 players. I just wouldn't. And I can iterate on that or articulate that a little bit more in a moment. But to me, this is 1 to 4 players. I haven't played it solo. I've just played it 2 to 4. And I think 2 is really solid. I think 3 is really solid. I think 4 is good and the max I would do it at. I think it is still a good game at 4, but you can start to maybe feel the strain a little bit of why I wouldn't want to play this at 5 or 6. And so it's very satisfying when you are able to craft that good hand combination. When you're able to find there's 2 things that are enjoyable about card comboing in this. Number 1 is when you get the bones or the blueprints for a combination from the beginning, and you're able to successfully achieve that, and you're able to attain the extra cards that you needed to just make it work perfectly. And then on the flip side of that is when you have nothing, and from nothing you're able to craft your own combination of cards. That is additionally very satisfying. And there's a good amount of player interaction where you can take the cards that other players might need, or you're able to make them banish cards from their hand, or you're able to take banished cards that are out of the game and maybe resuscitate some of them and bring them back in. There's enough mechanical combinations to make it a fun and new experience every time you play. The deck is very large. It's like 120 cards, and you typically will not make it through more than half of the deck in a game. So that means that once you're shuffling that deck, the combination of cards that you can get, you may get a card that is empowered or made better by other cards, and you may never see them over the course of the game. And that could be simultaneously frustrating, or it could be exciting as you adapt to that, because there are cards that can substitute and pretend to be other cards. And so there are ways to work around not finding cards, but also the joy of not finding cards is that every game you're going to have a different combination of characters and abilities that you move through. So that's what I like about it. I'm gonna add into this section what I don't like about it, specifically from a production quality standpoint. If I recommended this game, I would probably recommend the retail edition. It's maybe one of the only times I've felt the need to make that distinction, and when I have actively, maybe regretted is the right word, or just not been pleased with what I got. And I think that there were a substantial enough people who felt the same, to where there have been some, changes made. Like, you can purchase some of these components that are produced in a new way on their website. So inside here, I'll just show it to you. It's got a good organizer, which most of Stegmaier games do. But beyond that, number one, these are the card holders, which you use to, if you want. I've never used them in a game because I tested them prior and I did not like them. But you can put your cards in that groove. The only difference or difficulty is that the card, this is so light of a plastic that the cards will make it fall over, which is not helpful if you're trying to hide your hand. So these are very finicky and not substantial in terms of weight or functionality. So these are kind of useless, and the length of them and the depth and width of having 6 of these, that's a decent amount of box space that's wasted and components that aren't used. So that's not great. And then the major complaint that a lot of people had were these anodized, and you guys can't really see this super well, but these are anodized painted metal components, which the sheen and shine of these metal pieces actually make some of the colors non-distinct from each other. And so depending on the light that you're on, they're actually not bad out here, but if you're inside and if it's at night or something like that, it can be harder to actually tell the color of these cubes, which isn't ideal. And then the final thing that other people complained about, which is probably the thing that I didn't notice at all, is that no, well, that doesn't really. Is that these are the gold cards, and they have a gold foil on them. And supposedly, if you are looking at it from the back, in the right light, you can tell that there is a gold foil from the back side of the card. Which, if you're trying to hide what you have from your, opponents, that's not ideal. However, I didn't really feel, I didn't notice that a lot, and that didn't really bother me. You could also solve that pretty easily by having matte-backed card sleeves. So, if you are a card sleever, you could solve that problem pretty easily. But yeah, so just from a production standpoint, the collector's edition kind of bugs me a little bit. Almost to the point where I was like, I would probably just go out and buy the retail edition, sleeve it, and then have that be my main version of the game. I don't mind having plastic pieces if the plastic pieces are easier to discern in all types of light and all day and night over these metal pieces, though. And also just because of the slimmer box, that it would come in, that would create less of a space in my office. So I like it a lot, and I think that it's supremely better if you have read the books. And my concerns about it are player count and production quality of the collector's edition. But I don't hold that against the game. That's just a physical component, shtick that I have with it that bothers me. The one element of gameplay that I mentioned earlier that would be of caution to people is I really don't think that this works at 5 or 6 for 2 reasons. Number one is this is a card game where the text of the card is vitally important. What a card does, the action that it gives you whenever you place it down, and then the scoring ability that it has at the bottom that goes along and combines with other cards, you have to know those for every card because that informs your entire strategy. So the issue there is that the board faces the same way. And if it faces the same way, you just can't fit 5 or 6 people facing one small board like that. You'd be ridiculously capped at the end of a table, and it just wouldn't work comfortably from a logistical standpoint, which seems unfair as a critique of the game, but the logistics of how you play the game are part of the gameplay experience. And just having 5 or 6 people trying to cram and all be able to read and denote what is happening doesn't really work. I think that there's maybe a way around that with maybe having a lazy Susan that you put the board onto, and then you can essentially turn it to each player as it's their turn. But then the other issue that comes into play is that if you have that many characters, that means that the board, the locations and the cards on it can drastically change between when the first and the 6th player goes. So by the time it gets back to your turn, so much may have happened that makes it doesn't make it as strategically satisfying to come up with a plan for a completely different board state every single turn, versus at lower player counts like 2, 3, and even sometimes at 4, you see exactly the cards that are there, and the opponents can change some of what's happening, but other cards will still remain there over the course by the time it gets back to you. So you're able to create a little bit more coherent of a strategy because of the lower player count and the lesser turnover of cards on the board. So that's what I like about it. That was a long-winded section. Will it leave? Maybe the collector's edition will leave, and I'll maybe get the retail version. I don't see the need for it to go anytime soon. 3-4 years down the line, yeah, maybe it'll leave if I feel like I've tired out the deck. However, if they come out with expansion content, because this first box, the characters in it and the cards, it really only focuses on the first trilogy. And there's a second trilogy, and they're 2 books into it. The third one is on the way. Pierce Brown is writing it, as far as I know right now. And so if they come out with expansion content, then that will probably maybe secure its place in my collection for longer, because I'm going to want to explore how that new deck and any new mechanics that are introduced, how all of that influences the game. So very much interested and hopeful that that will happen, because I think that would secure this as a longer stay or staple in my collection. But certainly it has the potential to leave, and I might also downsize the edition, but I may wait until the expansion. If there's a different version of it that is crafted in the future, maybe to include the expansion, I might seriously consider swapping out, but we'll see what happens. As far as will it leave, not now, maybe later, depends on an expansion, if that's in the works. Timestamp. Rating. I think this is a 7.5 for me. 7.5 out of 10. And I think that is primarily because I am familiar with the source material. I don't think if you haven't read the books, I don't know if you would rate it as high, unless card management and card comboing is just already a super solid mechanic for you. But I think that the world building and the attention and adherence to the lore makes this a more compelling experience for me had it been otherwise. You know, I don't think, if this had been about an IP that I had no clue about, I don't know if I would have felt as strongly about it. But for me, it's a 7.5 out of 10 probably. Thumbnail. There we go. That's got to be a good thumbnail. Picturesque fence behind me, gorgeously weathered furniture, leaves that I brushed off to the side so they were out of frame. Beautiful thumbnail. All right, time to go do all the other work I need to do. Bye.